Okay, this podcast is on the third commandment, which joins the second commandment in making sure we aren't trivializing or attempting to manipulate God by treating God like a toy or tool. I often catch myself doing this in my prayers, giving God a multiple choice list, saying, God, I'll do whatever you want, as long as it's option A, B, or C. There's a lot of different translations of this commandment, which show the many ways that it can be interpreted, from, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, to, you shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God, or, you shall not swear falsely by the name of the Lord your God, and finally, do not use my name for evil purposes. The meaning of the third commandment can include all of these misuses of God's name. But what does God's name mean? Throughout the Bible, one's name means one's very nature or character. So God's name means God's nature, character, presence, power. It was widely believed in the ancient world that to know someone's name gave you power over that person. So to speak God's name means to mobilize the presence and power of God. That's why after their wrestling match, the angel refuses to tell Jacob its name. Also, as Bernard Eller observes, it may be that when God explains to Moses that the name Yahweh means, I am who I am, God is basically saying, I'm not going to give you any such names, Moses. I don't intend to be manipulated by you or anyone else. I am who I am. So the third commandment keeps us from using God as a tool to promote our personal agenda. It also keeps us from using God's name to harm others. The root meaning of the word translated as in vain is to be empty. So if we say, God is love, as if these words were just empty, and don't believe it or act like it, we're taking God's name in vain. If we pray to God without full force faith in God's healing power and presence, we're taking God's name in vain. The Hebrew verb that's usually translated in this commandment as take can also mean to lift up, and may refer to lifting up one's hands, which was a common gesture when swearing an oath. So this commandment also frees us from swearing by God's name falsely or frivolously. It frees us from trivializing God's power, or making God an accomplice to our lies. In this way, the third commandment relates to God, as the commandment about not bearing false witness relates to our neighbor. The third commandment is interpreted as prohibiting false oaths in the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus says, Again, you've heard that it was said to those of ancient times, You shall not swear falsely. But I say to you, don't swear at all. Let your word be yes, yes, or no, no. Later on in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus actively obeys this commandment when he prays, Hallowed be thy name. The Hebrew name for the God of Israel, Yahweh, is likely a form of the verb meaning to be. Just think about that for a moment. God is a verb. So this commandment urges us to stand in awe of the active nature, character, presence, and power of God. The Bible resources that I quoted in this podcast are listed on the Sunday School section of the tmcyouth.com website.
This podcast is produced and copyrighted by the First Church of Christ Scientists in Boston.